Greetings, booktubers. Welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Welcome to a weekend reading report edition of Grammaticus Books, where we're going to go over 4 books here that I've read in the last week and a half to 2 weeks. Now, I know my video schedule has been a little bit off, and that's because of real-world events that have been going on in the background here at Gravesend, south of the Shire. I've had life has thrown a spanner wrench into the works, so I'm just getting up videos when I can, as I can. But I am going to try to get up at least 1 video a week, and we're going to shoot for 2. We'll just have to see how it goes. But here today on the channel, we're doing a reading report. We're covering 4 books today, and the first one that we're going to go over is White Knight by Jim Butcher. Now, this is the 9th in the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, which is his occult detective hero, Harry Dresden, who is a PI, a private investigator working in Chicago in the 1990s, who works very closely with the Chicago PD whenever they have something odd that they can't solve that seems to smack of the supernatural, and they bring in Harry Dresden. These are great books. The first book, Stormfront, was a very solid entry into this occult detective series. It wasn't fantastic, but it was good. And then the next book was just even a little bit better, and then they got better and better and better with each book. Book number 7, which is Deadbeat, is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of my favorite occult detective novels of all time. And so when I got to White Knight here, which is book 9, I was really looking forward to it. And then I was disappointed when it turned out to just sort of be kind of phoned in by Jim Butcher. It was tinny, it was flat. And I talked about this book in one of my previous videos where I was 330 pages into it, of this 380-page novel. And I said it was going to take a miracle for these last 50 pages to pull its chestnuts out of the fire and turn it around. Well, I'm happy to report that those last 50 pages, Jim Butcher suddenly discovered himself. He took a shot of espresso coffee and suddenly started writing like Jim Butcher again. And the story takes off. The characters came into focus. All the overarching plot lines that he had laid out in the previous 8 novels started to tie in miraculously into those last 50 pages. And the book ends with a bang, figuratively and literally. And it did come out of it and had a fantastic ending to it. Now, is it worth waiting through 330 pages of meh in order to get to 50 pages of good Harry Dresden? I'm going to have to say no. No, it isn't. But it was nice to see that the book did sort of come back into focus and become more of a traditional Harry Dresden style story there in the last 50 pages. So that was White Knight. That was book number 1 that we're reviewing here. Book number 2. Book number 2 is Jack of Shadows by Roger Zelazny. Published in 1971. This book is a high fantasy book that is very much inspired by and a little bit of an homage to Jack Vance and the Dying Earth series over here in terms of its whole atmosphere and its setting and its main character, its hero or anti-hero, as I should say. Jack of Shadows is actually referencing Jack Vance. That's how Zelazny wrote it. The other story, kind of myth that goes along with the story about how it was written is that Roger Zelazny wrote this book in 1 take. It was his first draft. He just sat down, he knocked the book out in 1 take in a first draft, never went back and did any re-edits on the book, sent it off to the publisher, and it was published in his first run-through, which is pretty amazing. So what is Jack of Shadows, or Shadow Jack as it's sometimes known, as a hero is sometimes known? What is it about? It takes place on an alternate world or a science fiction world somewhere not on Earth that is tidally locked, meaning that the world does not rotate. So one half of it faces into the sun, the hemisphere, and is continually in light and is known as the light side. And that side is ruled by science. The other half is the dark side, and it is ruled by magic. And you have lords of magic that live on the dark side, and their magic is focused in the places where they reside, in these loci where they live. And that's where they're strongest. Shadow Jack is in between them. He lives in the littoral region, or I should say his power is based in that littoral region, the twilight zone between light and darkness. And his power derives from shadows, and anywhere he can create and be in a shadow gives him magical abilities that are virtually godlike. Now, this is definitely new wave science fiction here that's being written by Roger Zelazny, science fiction / high fantasy, that very much goes into the psychology and personality and the psychoses of its anti-hero, Shadow Jack or Jack of Shadows, as he pursues this plot line, this theme of revenge, which is driving him forward. There's quite a bit of, I'm not going to call it navel gazing, but we'll call it soul gazing. And if you read the story, you know exactly what I mean. And the fate of the world and the fate of Jack resides in how he resolves this revenge issue that is driving him forward. Now, do I recommend this book? How would I rate it? And I'm going to punt. I'm going to punt this football down the field. We're going to stick a pin in it. I'm going to have to reread it. I finished the book, and there's a lot going on there, and I really get the feeling that I didn't fully absorb everything that Roger Zelazny was trying to do in this book. I really think that there's a direct reference here, a metaphor by Roger Zelazny with this tidally locked world for the two halves of the human brain. And I think there's quite a bit more going on under the surface, and it's going to take a reread. But I have reordered this book from the library. I should have it within the week. I'm going to reread it as soon as I get it, and I will give you guys a full review of Jack of Shadows once that comes in. Also, quick plug for libraries. If you're not making use of your library system, you are missing out on a great resource, and I highly recommend you guys looking into your local libraries and supporting your local libraries. Book 3, I finished my annual reread of The Hobbit. And here you've got the 1966 Houghton Mifflin Press edition of The Hobbit, a hardback. It's a real nice copy. It's got Tolkien's original artwork in here in black and white. It's the first time I've read this copy that I own of The Hobbit. I usually read this Ballantine Press mass market copy of it that you can see is well loved and well worn. That's my usual go-to. So I thought I'd do something different. It's The Hobbit. It's great. What can I say? It's one of my favorite books of all time. There are numerous passages in here that are absolutely young adult fiction, young adult fantasy, without question. But there's so much here in this book. Here's my fancy pants edition of it from Houghton Mifflin Press, which has all of Tolkien's artwork in it as well, with this great plate on the front from his artwork. But it's all in color. Like I said, it's my fancy pants edition of it. But there are passages in here by Tolkien that are just pure magic. It's where he's just weaved the spell of pure magic onto the page as he's creating Middle-earth and all these fantastic characters, the hobbits, Gandalf, the dwarves, setting the whole scene, the whole background for his Lord of the Rings, that just make this one of my favorite books of all time. And that's The Hobbit. That was book number 3. Before we go to book number 4, though, I've got another version of The Hobbit, which is by Eclipse Comics. David Wenzel illustrating The Hobbit. There are 3 issues up here that they did, a 3-issue series that was adapted by Charles Dixon with the art by David Wenzel. And David Wenzel is just a superior artist. I mean, look at this artwork that he's got in here. It is absolutely gorgeous. His renderings of Gandalf. Here you've got a wraparound cover on this graphic novel, are just fantastic. Look at this panel over here, this splash page of Gandalf coming into Bilbo's home here, in his home under the hill, popping in with all the dwarves as they come in for the unexpected party. Just gorgeous. I mean, just superior artwork. I really love this edition, this copy, this graphic novel edition of it. And again, that's the first of 3 issues on that one. So what is the 4th book that I read? The 4th book is Sweet Silver Blues by Glen Cook, the author who's most famous for his Black Company series. And this is the first entry in his P.I. Garrett series, which is sort of an occult detective novel. I would describe it as Dashiell Hammett meets Terry Pratchett. His main character here, who is Garrett, who's a private investigator, lives in this fairy fantasy world where you have all of these fantasy beings. You've got centaurs, you've got unicorns, you've got giants, you've got goblins of all shapes and sizes. And he lives and works with these people in this multicultural, multi-diverse society in this main city called Toon Fairy, where he gets employed to investigate the most bizarre things. Now, it is Glen Cook, so it's a lot darker than Terry Pratchett. He does have that same darkness, and he does bring that same short, terse prose that he has in his Black Company and injects it here and invests it into Sweet Silver Blues. And in this novel here, his main character, Garrett, has been employed by a group of gnomes in order to track down the heir to a silver fortune that they have inherited and has been bequeathed to this lady, this mysterious lady, that he has to find in order to see if she wants to inherit the silver or if she's willing to turn it over to the gnomes. And it leads him all across all of these very dark adventures here throughout this book. It was entertaining. I did like it quite a bit. Like I said, it does reek a lot of, or smack of, I should say, Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler in terms of the prose in here and his writing style, where he puts in a ton of those detective one-liners, those old noir detective one-liners. In his short clipped writing style does tend to facilitate that quite a bit and make it work in naturally into the stories. However, it does sort of act as a double-edged sword as well, because he puts a lot of those one-liners in here, and because the rest of his writing style, the rest of his sentence structure is so short and clipped that it almost turns into parts in here where normal dialogue ceases, and all you're left with are these little short detective quips and snarky one-liners, and it kind of breaks down the dialogue. And he could have dialed it back quite a bit and built up a little bit more dialogue. That's my one complaint about it. But it was very entertaining. It's the first one in the series. I would give this a solid 7.5 out of 10, and I would read more of these books here. But this is a very interesting book. This one here, this is it's like, I don't know, like a 30th printing of this or something like that. But they washed out the cover on it. There was the original cover that was done for this book. I'll put it up over here. That is this exact same cover, but it's much crisper. All the colors are more vivid. They pop out a little better. And for some reason, they decided to wash it out in this version here, which is Rock Fantasy, R-O-C, Rock Fantasy. Okay, well, the copyright page is extremely unhelpful. It does not tell you which printing this is or what year it was printed. It only lists the original publication date of 1987 and original copy right date of 1987. If I can find that out, I'll put it up here on the screen. But that was Sweet Silver Blues, and that was the 4th book that I read. I'm going to wrap this one up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you read any of these books, if you got opinions on them, put them down in the comments section below. I do read and respond to all the comments. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up and say take care, be safe, and I will catch you guys when I can.